You're here for a reason. That's not something I say lightly, because this video, this exact moment, this sentence, is not random. It found you during a time when you feel like everything is unraveling. And maybe you don't want another spiritual pep talk. Maybe you've already heard enough of those. But this isn't that. This is the space between the noise, the voice inside the silence. And if you've been crying at night, not out of weakness, but because the weight has finally exceeded your strength, then listen closely. Because what you think is a breakdown may actually be a signal, a sacred pulse, a whisper from the very fabric of reality bending toward you with purpose. You've been asking for a sign. You've begged the sky for meaning. You've whispered, "Why me?" in the dark when no one was watching. But the universe doesn't shout. It doesn't send emails. It doesn't arrive on your timeline. It responds with alignment. And that's what this is. Let's begin with something no one told you. When you cry at night, when the tears fall in silence with no audience, no filter, no strength left to pretend, something opens. Not just emotionally, energetically, spiritually. In that moment, your soul is naked, stripped of ego, stripped of expectations, stripped of the armor that kept you numb. And that's when the universe listens most, because you're no longer speaking from your persona, you're speaking from your truth. People think the universe responds to confidence, affirmations, loud declarations. But the deepest transformations are born in the hush, in the raw trembling of a heart that finally says, "I can't do this alone anymore." What's happening in those moments isn't collapse. It's alignment. It's the invisible energy around you reconfiguring, slowly, deliberately, like tectonic plates shifting under pressure. And while it feels like you're breaking, what's actually happening is a deep unrooting. The things that no longer serve you, beliefs, attachments, old identities, are being pulled from your system. It doesn't feel pretty. It doesn't feel sacred. It feels like drowning. But that's the paradox. Growth never feels like growth when you're inside it. It feels like loss. It feels like confusion. It feels like spiritual abandonment. And yet, it's in that silence that the signal goes out. The universal pulse, the unseen language, begins to activate. You don't realize it yet, but the people, signs, insights, and healing you've been praying for, they're already in motion. Not because of your strength, but because of your surrender. You see, surrender isn't quitting. It's permission. Permission for the universe to step in and move things you were never meant to carry alone. And here's the part no one talks about. Crying at night isn't a breakdown, it's a prayer. It's a vibration more honest than words, more magnetic than affirmations, more real than anything you post online. It's what happens when the soul can no longer maintain the illusion. The tears you've cried lately? They've watered the very ground your next life will grow from. And while you can't see the roots yet, they're forming. In silence, in dark, in sacred stillness. So no, you're not being ignored. You're being realigned. And no, this pain isn't random. It's recalibration. This message, these exact words, are your sign. And not in a mystical, overused internet sense, but in a very literal, grounded, soul-specific sense. You asked, why now? Because you're ready. Not ready for things to get easier, but ready to let go of who you were forced to become, so you can finally remember who you were always meant to be. Stay with me. Let's take a step deeper. Because what happened to you? What broke you? What left you crying in silence night after night? It wasn't chaos. It wasn't cruelty. It was design. Not a punishment, a process. You see, the universe doesn't waste pain. It doesn't scatter suffering like dice on a table. It delivers it with surgical precision, cutting into illusions we didn't even know we were wearing. That heartbreak, that loss, that season where nothing made sense, they weren't interruptions. They were invitations. Invitations to shed. To shed the expectations placed on you. To shed the stories you were told. To shed the armor that once protected you, but now only keeps you numb. And yes, I know it didn't feel like transformation. It felt like punishment, like betrayal, like life itself had turned against you. But what if that chaos was never against you? What if it was a sacred unbuilding, so something greater could rise? Pain doesn't just break, it reconstructs. It exposes where you were pretending. It collapses the false altars we've been worshiping: money, approval, control. It forces us to stop running, stop performing, stop hiding. And in that vulnerable space, in that quiet wreckage, we finally become honest. You didn't need more strength. You needed more truth. And pain gave you that. You see, the reason it hurt so much wasn't because you were weak. It's because the lie you were carrying was heavy, and the universe couldn't allow it to stay. So it removed what you wouldn't. It collapsed what you were clinging to, not to leave you empty, but to finally give you space to become whole. This is the part no one celebrates, the hollowing. But every mystic, every awakened soul, every prophet went through it. The desert, the silence, the long night of not knowing who you are anymore. And that's where you are now. But the deeper the hollowing, the greater the purpose. If it feels like the universe is stripping you of everything, it's because it's about to fill you with something real. So don't resist the emptiness. Don't rush to fix it. Don't mask it with distractions. Sit in it. Let it speak. Let it show you what you were never meant to carry. Because pain, when it's done clearing what cannot stay, leaves behind something else. Something quiet. Something ancient. Something holy. Silence is misunderstood. Most people fear it. They think it means nothing is happening, that they've been abandoned, that their prayers disappeared into a void. But the universe doesn't grow life in noise. It grows it in stillness, in the unseen underground chambers of the soul, where no applause can reach and no audience can applaud. When you cried at night, something ancient began to take root, not in the world outside you, but in the soil of your becoming. And it's quiet there, so quiet that it can feel like absence. But what you're feeling isn't neglect, it's gestation. You are being grown, not watched. You are being reformed, not ignored. Roots always grow in darkness. Seeds break open in the dirt. The caterpillar dissolves in the silence of its cocoon before wings ever touch air. Why would it be any different for you? What looks like stagnation is often sacred reconstruction. The old version of you, the one shaped by pleasing, performing, pretending, no longer fits. So the universe removes what isn't real, not to punish you, but to make room for what is. This is why things fell apart, why people disappeared, why the old comfort stopped working. Because comfort isn't the goal. Alignment is. And alignment requires shedding. You weren't meant to keep holding what hurt just because it was familiar. You weren't meant to stay in environments that made you shrink. You weren't meant to carry emotions that were never truly yours. But the silence, it revealed all of that. Not through words, through tension, through tears, through the deep knowing that you couldn't go back, even if you wanted to. That's what awakening feels like. Not like glory, but like confusion, like grief, because something inside you already knows. You've outgrown who you were pretending to be. And now your soul is rooting itself in deeper ground. You may not see it yet. You may still feel broken. But your spirit is reorganizing. The version of you that will emerge, quietly, steadily, will no longer chase what was never meant for you. You'll no longer beg to be seen, because you'll finally see yourself. And you'll no longer seek validation, because you'll carry a presence that speaks louder than explanation. The world teaches us to move fast, look polished, stay ahead. But healing is slow, messy, holy. The universe does not rush. It does not shout. It does not miss. So if you're still in the silence, still crying, still aching, still waiting, trust the dark, because something is growing where no one can see. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and recognize yourself again, not as you were, but as you were always meant to be. Something changes when you've cried enough. Not on the surface, the world won't notice, but deep beneath your ribs, in the place where silence used to hurt, a shift begins. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's undeniable. You no longer chase what used to define you. You no longer need to be understood. You don't explain your absence, your quiet, your distance. Because after the breaking, you start to recognize that what shattered wasn't you. It was the version of you that was trying to survive. The one who wore smiles like armor. The one who begged the world to see her worth. She was necessary, but she was never meant to stay. And now you've begun to carry something different. Not louder, not brighter, but heavier, more rooted. You've seen the inside of your own grief. You've walked barefoot across the wreckage of what you thought would last. And you're still here. That changes a person. There's a quiet power in that. A gravity that follows those who've suffered and stayed open. Because the ones who've wept in the night and rose in the morning carry a frequency you can't fake. They don't speak to be heard. They speak because their presence has already said everything. You've likely noticed it. People are drawn to your silence now more than they ever were to your words. They feel it, even if they can't name it. What they sense is truth. Live truth. Embodied pain turned into embodied peace. And it didn't come from a book. It came from the long nights, the unanswered prayers, the questions that refused to resolve. What they feel now is resonance. The soul doesn't recognize performance. It recognizes experience. So don't be surprised if others start to ask where you've been, what happened, why you seem so different. And maybe you won't be able to explain it, because some awakenings don't come with language. They come with presence. You no longer carry the urge to prove yourself, because you now belong to yourself. That's what pain, when transformed, leaves behind. A steady kind of knowing, not intellectual, spiritual. You've survived the collapse not by climbing out quickly, but by letting it teach you how to breathe beneath the weight. And now you move slower, speak softer, stand stiller, not because you're hiding, but because you've become something unshakable. And when the world tries to pull you back into its noise, you'll remember, you've already heard the deeper sound, the one beneath the silence, the one that rebuilt you. Most people think healing means returning to who you were before the pain, but you've already seen too much, felt too much, lost too much. You're not going back, because you're not supposed to. You're not healing to become who you were. You're healing to become who you were always meant to be, before the noise, before the shame, before the world taught you to shrink. And this version of you doesn't just carry scars, it carries light. Not the kind that blinds or demands attention, but the kind that warms a room silently. There's something sacred about people who've suffered deeply and chosen to stay soft. They move differently. They listen without judgment. They speak less but say more. You've become that without realizing it. While others were watching you disappear, you were gathering wisdom. While they thought you were falling apart, you were actually falling into alignment. Because what survives the fire shines differently. It doesn't need to explain. It doesn't need validation. It just is. And people notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. Your energy speaks now. In the way you walk. In the way you pause before answering. In the way your eyes carry stories no one will ever fully understand. This is the quiet power of a healed presence. You've stopped reacting. You've started discerning. You're not triggered by the things that used to unravel you, because now you see them as mirrors, not monsters. And in those moments where the old pain rises, you don't run. You alchemize. You feel the tremor. You let it speak. Then you let it pass without letting it take you. That is mastery. Not perfection, but presence. The healer isn't the one who avoided the storm. It's the one who walked through it barefoot and came back holding lanterns. That's you now. And not because you asked for this path, but because you answered it. Every tear, every collapse, every night you thought would never end, was shaping you into someone the world desperately needs. Someone who understands pain without amplifying it. Someone who can sit in another's darkness without flinching. Someone who's not afraid to shine, because they remember what it was like to sit in the dark with no light at all. So if you feel different now, it's because you are. If you feel distant from old versions of yourself, it's because you've outgrown their purpose. And if you feel like people are seeing you with new eyes, it's because, for the first time, you've stopped hiding. You didn't notice the moment it happened. There was no flash, no music, no voice from above, just stillness, and a strange calm where the pain used to be. What you went through stripped you down, but it also revealed something that had always been there. A quiet light, not the kind you chase, the kind that rises from within, steady, real, undeniable. You've stopped trying to explain yourself. You no longer beg to be seen. You don't need to prove you've healed, because now you live it. Your silence carries weight. Your presence carries clarity. Your pain became a mirror, not a cage, and others feel it. They may not say it, but they pause around you. They lean in without knowing why. It's because you're no longer reaching for answers. You've become a space where answers land. What once disqualified you has now become your key. The nights that crushed you gave you access to a kind of compassion the untouched can't offer. And the best part? You don't need a stage. You don't need to shout. You walk into a room and people remember something forgotten in themselves. Because your scars don't scream. They radiate. You don't speak to impress. You speak to reveal. And often you don't speak at all, because the energy you carry already says what matters. This is the shift. You're no longer waiting to be saved. You've remembered that you were always the fire, not the one that burns to destroy, but the one that warms, guides, purifies. Now, when someone breaks near you, you don't panic. You don't try to fix. You hold space. Because you remember how sacred it was when the universe held you. That's the kind of strength the world doesn't celebrate, but the soul recognizes it instantly. You are no longer the one lost in the storm. You've become the one who walks beside others, while they find their own sky again. Not because you know all the answers, but because you've made peace with the questions. And somehow that's enough. The journey you thought would end you has become the thing that now anchors you. And the light you carry? It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. Just is. and it's exactly what someone else will need. On the night they begin to break, just like you once did, something shifts when you stop needing to force everything. You no longer try to control the outcome, the timing, or the people. You stop clinging. You start allowing. And strangely, that's when real power arrives. Because true power isn't loud. It's not about being right. It's the calm in your chest when everything around you shakes. It's the way you say no without anger. It's walking away without needing to be chased. What the world calls weakness, softness, stillness, surrender, is actually strength in its most sacred form. You're not fading. You're focusing. You don't rush anymore. You align. You don't demand respect. You carry it. And in that space, life begins to move with you, instead of against you. You used to wish it had never happened. The nights, the tears, the collapse. But now, you start to see it differently. What nearly destroyed you wasn't meant to vanish. It was meant to transform. The past doesn't go away. It gets repurposed, rewritten in silence. Your scars aren't reminders of pain. They're proof that you endured. And they speak, not with shame, but with quiet authority. What tried to end you now empowers you. What was once unbearable is now sacred ground. You walk differently, not because you've forgotten, but because you remember without breaking. There's redemption in that. Not loud, not cinematic, but real. Now your story is no longer something you hide. It's something you carry like fire, soft and steady, and it lights the way for someone else still crawling through the dark. You didn't rise just to enjoy the view. You came back carrying something. Not answers, presence. You no longer walk to escape the past. You walk with it woven into your spine, and others feel it. They come to you not because you shine, but because you've sat where they're sitting. Because you remember what silence tastes like, what breaking feels like, what praying without sound really is. You're not trying to lead, but you're followed anyway. Not because you have a message, but because you are the message. Your life, the ache, the collapse, the rising, became a map. A quiet proof that it's possible to return, even when nothing makes sense. And now, without asking for it, you've become the voice someone else needed. On the night they almost gave up, you thought the breaking would define you. But now you see, it introduced you to the version of you that doesn't perform, that doesn't beg, that doesn't hide. Pain didn't end your story. It tore the pages you no longer needed. And in the space where identity used to cling, something true began to speak. Softly, firmly, undeniably. You are no longer the same. And that's the point. You weren't meant to be polished. You were meant to be real. You weren't chosen for perfection. You were chosen to remember, to carry light, not above others, but beside them. And now that you've crossed the threshold, you understand. The tears, the silence, the nights that almost swallowed you were never punishment. They were the voice of the universe, pulling you home. If you're still crying at night, if your heart still aches in silence, know this: you were never forgotten, never abandoned, never overlooked. Your tears were not weakness. They were sacred signals. A dialogue between your soul and something far greater than this world can see. You're not broken. You're becoming. Not louder, but deeper. You've been answered in ways your mind may never understand, but your soul already does. This moment, right now, is not random. You're hearing this because something within you is ready. Ready to stop searching. Ready to stop proving. Ready to simply remember. You are not here by accident. And your pain, was never a punishment,